Dear people, thank you for being with us for this session on the ERA part of the work program Widening, and would like to welcome you all to this session. Be aware of the possibility to interact with us, with the Commission people through the Slido and in particular via the QR code that you are now seeing on your screen. And we will take the questions through this interaction. So now I would like to introduce briefly the session on universities, and the speaker number one. So as you all know, there is two big pillars in the ERA part of WIDERA. The first one is dealing with the former SWAFs aspect, and the second one is related to universities and researchers. So now you will have a presentation on the actions and topics enshrined in the work program by Mr. Stijn de Lore from RTD, Director General RTD A3, and with the Mrs. Karamali as well, who is going to interact backstage, if I may, with Mr. de Lore. So maybe Stijn, over to you, and then we will take the question after your intervention and your presentation. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, Fabrice. Good morning, everyone. Very glad to be here with you. Although it would have been much nicer, of course, to exchange this information in person with you. Can I have my first slide? So I'm working in the unit RNI actors and research careers, and I will be focusing on topics supporting RNI actors and research careers in the ERA part of the WIDERA work program. This presentation is prepared together with my other policy colleagues in the unit, Slaven Mislijesevic, Dario Capezzuto, and Laura Sancho. Dario and Laura and my head of unit, Lia Karamali, are with us today backstage as well. Next slide, please. So just to remind you about the submission deadlines. So we have two types of two calls, one in 2021, closing already on the 23rd of September this year. So we perfectly know for some of you, will ruin your summer. Apologies for that, but nevertheless, we hope for a lot of applications. And a call in 2022, closing on the 20th of April. Now, for all of the topics, the actions I will be talking this morning, these are coordination and support actions, to be clear. Next slide, please. I want to put this in the frame because the topics under this ERA part are strengthening the European research area. It's important in your applications that you refer to this appropriately. So we have four basic strands in the new European research area, for which the communication came out in September last year, and the council conclusions in December. The various topics are following the four priorities of the ERA, prioritizing investments and reform, improving access to excellence, translating research innovation results into economic value, and deepening the European research area. Now, I will be speaking about focusing in this presentation on three levels that are interlinked: the ecosystems, the actors, more precisely higher education institutions, and talents, the individual level. I will be speaking or explaining the topics on ERA hubs, respectively, support for research innovation actors, including higher education institutions, and support for researchers and research managers. Next slide, please. So first, the topic at the ecosystems level. This is a topic for 2022. Make no mistake, so April next year is the deadline. testing of the Era Hub concept pilot phase. Next slide, please. Now, vibrant ecosystems are essential conditions for economic growth and prosperity. This is not only true for the European Union, but with this, the new era has a strong aim of maximizing value and knowledge creation, circulation, and use. And the new policy initiative, Era Hubs, is aimed at stimulating place-based innovation, at upskilling, at interregional and interregional connectivity, as well as in fostering a broad transnational cooperation through mobilization of national, including also regional and local research innovation systems. And through the Era Hubs, we want to fill gaps in terms of where ecosystems are, make sure, in fact, that ecosystems pop up across the entire era, and also ensure that successful ones get easier access to talents and investments. You see that this action in the work program is continuing on a study on preparatory work that we are conducting right now on Era Hubs, developing the Era Hubs concept, basically. We are identifying success factors from successful knowledge ecosystems, often within its core universities or other research organizations. And we are looking into how these actors interact, how they cooperate, how they transfer knowledge, which platforms they use, how successful technology transfer offices work at the center of these ecosystems, what are the requirements, which standards can we derive, and in order to step up the game across the entire Era territory. So it's important to look into this study when you prepare your applications. And this study is leading to the Era Hubs concept. I have to explain how it probably or may look. It is based or will be based on existing collaborative structures and capacity. So it's not about new structures. It will make connection between within and between local R&I ecosystems, meaning it will enhance both local interactions and collaborations between ecosystems. It will connect likely critical research innovation infrastructures and facilitate disruptive innovations. It will provide services supporting knowledge transfer, knowledge circulation, exploitation, use, business creation, focusing on actors with limited transfer and exploitation competences. It has to ensure that research results are applied faster in the economy and society, addressing both transfer and exploitation, but also directionality. Promote mutual learning, and thereby over time facilitate defragmentation and cohesion. It will link to and collaborate with existing small and medium-sized enterprises, startup services networks such as the Enterprise Europe Network, Startup Europe. Overall, create a competitive European approach to promote business creation, valorization, and circulation. So this Era Hubs, for this action, the pilot action, we are looking for consortia who could pilot the Era Hubs concept, as I just tried to highlight. Next slide, please. Basically testing this concept, for which more information will be provided later this year in a publication for this study. So focusing on collaboration on platforms that maintain collaboration between ecosystem actors or other structure bringing together such actors. It has to fine-tune through experimentation the Era Hubs concept and its technical specifications and compliance criteria. Develop a toolkit of best practices and activities that ensure a strong basis for scale-up in different areas and territories. as well as development of monitoring mechanism to assess progress within the ecosystem, as well as in the connection between the ecosystems. And on the basis of an assessment, during this pilot, provide recommendations on how to deploy in later phases the full ERA hubs in different areas. So focusing on laggard regions in the ERA, as well as on stronger ones to improve access to investments. Next slide, please. So as expected outcome, projects are expected to contribute to testing the ERA hubs concept across different territories and structures, ensuring smart directionality. There is a mistake in the slide, I see, coordinating relationships, not ships, between the ERA and relevant national or regional entities. Develop a platform for collaboration and best practice exchange. Ensure interoperability between the ecosystems and within territorial ecosystems. Facilitate better circulation of talents in countries and regions. Talent flow through from academia to other sectors, in particular business sector, and the other way around. Providing a toolbox of best practices for researchers, innovators, industry, institutions, governments across Europe to cooperate. So the indicative budget for this topic is €3 million, and we are expecting to fund 2 projects. Next slide, please. We go a level lower, support for research innovation actors, research organizations, and universities. This is a topic for 2021, so closing in September. And this action is aimed at improving resilience of research innovation actors, so higher education institutions and other research organizations, against threats of any kind. Next slide, please. The idea is to empower universities and research organizations to protect themselves against threats of various kinds. This topic is complementing the current the guidelines for institutions to create awareness and beat foreign interference, which is currently being developed. The rationale is that higher education institutions and research organizations are facing threats, such as threats to academic freedom, freedom of research, institutional autonomy, various forms of foreign interference, and increasingly these threats take non-conventional forms, such as cyber attacks, infiltrations, espionage, disinformation campaigns. So, and all these actions seek to access research findings, destabilize or endanger higher education institutions and other institutions, and undermine fundamental European values. Now, the objective of this action is to introduce and gear R&I actors with simple and effective tools to boost resilience, to boost capacity to prevent, detect, and tackle such threats. Next slide, please. Potential activities are analyzing possible threats and identify mitigation measures, increase awareness of the threats within higher education institutions and research organizations, promote networking, optimizing of infrastructures and resources to ensure preparedness and resilience, as well as complement and reinforce EU action for academic freedom. And I refer to the upcoming European Pact for Research and Innovation. Next slide, please. We have a budget for €2 million, and we foresee to fund 2 projects. And projects are expected to contribute to increased awareness across the ERA, boosted capacities to prevent, detect, and respond to threats, improved resilience in general, and reinforce EU action for academic freedom, following also the Bonn Declaration under the German presidency last year. All right, next slide, please. This is a topic addressed to higher education institutions and it will open later with the deadline in April 2022. So it's a topic for 2022. It's a very ambitious one, and we expect very ambitious project applications as well. It's called Acceleration Services in Support of the Institutional Transformation of Higher Education Institutions. Next slide, please. Currently, the Commission, together with member states and higher education institutions, umbrella stakeholder organizations, we're developing a European strategy for universities, building on synergies or realizing synergies between the European research area, between the European education area, between the digital education action plan and the European skills agenda. The European strategy for universities will likely become a Commission communication expected for January next year. It will be provide a common vision on the future of universities in Europe, a holistic approach, including all missions of universities, education, research and innovation, and service to society. The strategy will identify priority areas for institutional change and develop a roadmap of support tools based on the needs of universities, as well as provide guidance for national reform where needed. This action is one of the tools that we envisage, one of the support tools. And the aim is to support institutional transformation or institutional changes better of universities and their surrounding ecosystems. On the right side of the slide, you see potential transformation areas for the research innovation dimension. Creating critical mass, so by integrated collaboration, joining forces, sharing capacity, developing a common agenda for research innovation based on the strengths of the participating universities, mainstreaming of open science practices and further digitization of universities, the strengthening of research careers, including reform of career assessment, strengthening knowledge transfer capacity, reinforced cooperation within surrounding ecosystems, and engagement with citizens. If you want to hear more about these, I suggest you take a look, you check out the information document, which is linked to in the work program, more precisely in footnote 13 on page 33. And this afternoon in the Widening parallel breakout session, we will also go a bit in more detail on the transformation areas, because we have a similar action under the Widening branch, not a similar action, an action that is also supporting institutional change with similar areas. Now, the objectives are, in fact, to develop a big project that allows to provide counseling services to higher education institutions, to pursue institutional changes. It needs to facilitate access to support mechanisms for higher education institutions of any kind, I mean, national, regional, European, and the surrounding ecosystems, or building the ecosystem to deliver institutional changes, as well as monitor progress. We expect a big project with many experts in areas that are provided as example on the right side. These experts could be outsourced to individual universities as well as networks of universities, and help in developing strategies, develop trainings, prepare roadmaps, help implementing action plans, etc. Help finding investments, liaise with governments. So next slide, please. So the potential activities are as follows: provide access to coaches, mentors, expertise, training from academia or outside academia for, as I mentioned, strategy development, roadmap development, initial implementation of these roadmaps, mapping of required support resources, detailed advice on access to funding. We aim for a kind of a standard methodology to specific investment agendas. We want the project to pilot the methodologies together with large user groups, either individual universities, as I said, or networks or alliances of universities and surrounding ecosystem actors, or even umbrella organizations of universities, and to monitor progress of the user group in the implementation of the chosen areas of the transformation agenda. It's up to the universities to decide in which areas they want to work. And of course, disseminate these practices. Next slide, please. We expect to fund one project with a budget for 10.5 million euro. It's highly ambitious, as I said. We expect the involvement of many institutions, umbrella organizations as users, and a long list of credible experts in open science, HR, mobility of researchers, governance of universities, research infrastructure management, and so on. The methodology developed should help institutions to pursue institutional transformation. The coaching services should help with best practice examples and with concrete guidance and concrete development of strategies. The acceleration service will be tested. The monitoring, it needs to be monitored, and the progress of the user groups needs to be checked. Lessons learned and policy feedback needs to be provided to European Commission and member states. It can link to the project can link to methodologies or reports provided by the HE Innovate, as well as with the human resources strategy for researchers. The one focusing more on the entrepreneurial side of institutional change, the other on human resources, strengthening research careers. The project needs to take into account synergies with higher education. So, and you need to keep an eye on the European strategy for universities, as I said, likely to be adopted in January. Next slide, please. Now we turn to support for the individual research innovation talent level. And this is a topic for 2022, developing an effective ERA talent pipeline. Next slide, please. Important to as reference are the Council conclusions adopted on the 28th of May this year. Deepening the European research area, providing researchers with attractive and sustainable careers and working conditions, and making brain circulation a reality. As well as a study that is ongoing and for which you will hear more later through publication. So the Council conclusions ask the following: development of an internal market for research that offers improved framework conditions for research careers, both in academia and beyond. Importance should be taken into account of attracting and retaining talent in Europe, facilitating interoperability and comparability among research careers. Reinforce synergies between the European education area and the ERA. Improve skills and lifelong training for researchers, in particular young scientists, and to boost recruitment, facilitate career progression. So this is the Council conclusions. It's important to know this. As a background information, we are developing a framework for research career, European framework for research careers, and several tools are under development. One of it is the recognition, to improving recognition of the profession, the skills, the competences. A skills taxonomy is being developed or updated. To keep an eye on ESCO, the European classification of skills and competences, ESCO. We are working on or mapping practices on entry and employment conditions, access to pensions, social security, contracts, remuneration. we are, together with the member states, considering a revamp of the charter and code for researchers to include open science, gender, new trends in career and mobility, taking into account challenges in academia, the precarity of research careers, of early career researchers, model tenure track system, and so on. And also, of course, challenges outside academia are taken into account. The interoperability of research careers between academia and outside academia, the flow through of talents in both directions. Next slide, please. Now, for this particular topic, we envisage actions to improve transferable skills training with the involvement of non-academic actors from the onset, from the design of the training, the stimulation of talent transfer to surrounding ecosystems, actions that boost value creation practices by researchers, by trainees, promote researchers' competences and qualifications in society. I refer to the ESCO skills taxonomy that will be adopted later this year. Enable interaction between ecosystem actors for knowledge production, circulation, and use. Improve the assessment of researchers, the career assessment, and propose methodologies for interaction between academia and business. Yeah, we have a budget, an indicative budget of €3 million, and I expect to projects are expected to be contributed by you between 1.5 and 2 million. So probably space for or room for 2 projects with a duration of 2 years. The projects are expected to create a common academic research career structure that is implementable throughout the era. A widespread recognition of skills and competences of people with a PhD to other employers, mainstreaming of tenure track-like systems, the mainstreaming of practices to involve non-academic sector in training and career development, mainstreaming value creation in intersectoral and intersector mobility schemes. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. I'm really sorry, I forgot to say next slide. So we covered this expected outcome. Just to say that we expect to fund 2 projects. Next slide, please. Okay, towards a European-wide training and networking scheme for research managers. This is a topic for this year, deadline September. It is targeting research managers and organizations that gather them. So why are we doing this? Because entities and regions who are proven strong in and excellent in knowledge creation and in knowledge circulation and use, as well as in also reflected in obtaining competitive funding, for instance, through the framework program, they more and more rely on a strong population of research managers. And this can take many shapes. Research policy advisors, project managers, data stewards, open science practitioners, financial support staff, business developers, innovation managers, research infrastructure operators, etc. And the aim of this action is, or we want to expand this strength across the entire era. This week, even a Nature paper was published earlier on the core role of research managers in research innovation systems. So with this topic, we want to improve training and skills development of research management staff. Next slide, please, sorry. To develop better research and innovation management capacity across the era, pave the way towards institutional acknowledgement of the research management profession and contribute to the setup of a clearer and more diverse career path of research managers in the many shapes research management can take. Next slide, please. Activities that could take place in the project are analyzing the EU landscape of research management, financial framework to support it. It can trainings, study visits, short staff exchanges, internships can take place. The development of guidelines for new research managers, exchange of good practices between institutions and entities employing research managers. Piloting, we expect that a European network for research managers will be piloted, benefiting from existing ones. That should be active across the entire era. North, south, east, west. Create new training paths and certification programs for research managers. Here and there in Europe, there are such programs. Try to integrate these. And we expect policy recommendations for the future on how to deliver research management under the new era in institutions. Next slide. We have a budget, an indicative budget of 3 million, and are expect to fund 2 different projects. The outcome, the expected outcome is as follows: improved knowledge for policy making, increased awareness about within research management staff about existing training or new training and network mobility opportunities, increased capacity throughout the era for research managers, providing support to scientists, improved awareness of the drivers and the peculiarity in higher education institutions and research organizations related to research management, establishment where possible of a central hub to provide the EU research system with the most appropriate skills for research management. With also active involvement of entities located in widening countries. And then provide recommendations towards a career path for research managers at national and EU level, referring to the certification. Okay, I'm going a bit over time. I see these are my last couple of slides. Next slide. So finally, this is also for the individual talent level. We also have 2 grants to identify beneficiaries. So this is not an open call. Who will be the beneficiaries identified in the work program. But I want to explain 2 of these actions. Next slide, please. Because they provide specific support tools for research careers, and our researchers, research institutions will be benefiting a lot from these 2 actions. First one is Resaver, which is a European pension fund, and the purpose of this grant is to provide financial support towards the functioning of the pension fund Resaver in its core activities over a period of 3 years. Core activities of the fund are administration, asset management, and rollout. So the Resaver provides solutions to the cross-border hurdles mobile researchers encounter. Have a look at it if you're a researcher. The second activity I would like to highlight, which is also a grant to identified beneficiary, is the ERA talent platform. I will explain this a bit deeper. It's a way of announcing that what we are doing to revamp EURAccess, the job portal for researchers that you know. This ERA talent platform will be an ERA pilot, a policy action. Next slide, please. So the ERA talent platform is included under Action 8 of the new ERA communication. It outlines EURAccess services, network, and portals, and this will be broadened towards this platform. It will be an online a one-stop shop with improved structure and governance, exploiting links to also Europass and EURES. Now, the Council conclusions on the future of ERA calls on the development of this ERA platform as an action to foster inclusiveness and remove barriers also to unbalanced mobility. The evolution of your access towards this platform will be done via 3 different calls under Horizon Europe. One will cover the full revamp of the portal into a marketplace for researchers and institutions with stronger data collection possibilities. Another action will cover its international dimension, designed to create transnational ties with researchers, with diaspora, scientific communities across the research innovation system globally. The third action, which is presented here, is a grant to identify beneficiaries with the objective of extending the scope of services provided by the EURAccess network. Next slide and final slide. Sorry, next slide. So the envisaged services for the talent platform will be targeted to researchers regarding mobility, so enhanced services for researchers and their families related to labor market integration, on career development with offering various levels of support, basic career orientation, advanced services for mentoring and coaching, as well as for institutions, more networking activities to connect researchers, employers, and local communities, enabling also interaction with large groups and discussions, as well as create communities of practice. For instance, practices related to talent management, enable best practice sharing, making communities alive and informed about new policies, because there is a lot going on at the EU policy level to support research careers in the coming years. Next slide. Thank you very much. You're opening back to Fabrice and opening the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Stijn, for this very comprehensive and very precise presentation on the, let's say, the what I call in the introduction, the pillar on universities, which is enshrined in the work program and in the specific program of the Council decision on Horizon Europe. Now it's time to question. We are a bit late, 8 minutes. But now we're going to take the question. So if I go back to the Slido, we have I counted 9 questions. Maybe yes. Thank you very much to put them on the screen. Maybe I propose to take first two of the questions related to the impact, and then maybe Stijn, I will pass the floor on to you for the acceleration service. So when it comes to the impact, so one of the questions is to give an example on the relation to the related to the European Research Area impact. Well, the impacts for the destination 3 are defined in the introduction of the work program. You have if I remember well, 21 possible impacts, and there is also a question on that. So sure, you are not supposed to cover all the impacts that are listed in the work program, but I would say that you probably have to make a relation to these impacts in your proposals, as well as the expected outcome that you have also to cover for each and every topic within the work program. So that's very important, and the impact will be also assessed within the assessment phase by our colleagues in the RIA agency. So now, when it comes to the acceleration service, we have first a question on the budget, the amount of budget, which is, as you say, important compared to the whole budget of the ERA part of WIDERA, but I will give the floor to Stijn. But you have to know that it is important to have a critical mass, and it's kind of seed money for the numerous universities in Europe. And now I will give the floor to Stijn to reply to this question.
Thank you, Fabrice. So indeed, it is a huge amount of money, but there is also a huge number of higher education institutions in Europe, almost 5,000. About 1,000 of them, 800 to 900, are operating in the middle of the knowledge square, education, research, innovation, service to society. Others are not, or not yet. And many institutions envisage institutional to change, to transform in several areas of research innovation dimension, put more emphasis on open science practices, on excellent research, work together or collaborate with other institutions. So we envisage a big and ambitious project with a lot of experts that can support individual institutions as well as networks of institutions to realize these institutional changes of their own choice. So it is a lot of money and a lot of objectives as well. So that is the reason. Projects could envisage to create a kind of cascade as well, not only provide counseling services by experts, but also seed funding indeed to institutions to help them to grow in the areas they want themselves. So I hope this clarifies things a bit. Over to you for the next question.
Okay, Stijn, thank you very much for this reply, as you say, which is very important as we are talking about the transformation of universities linked to the revamping of the European research area. So now maybe we can go through again the acceleration service. There is also a question on the next European University Alliance's call, I guess on the Erasmus part in EAC, and maybe you should, if you can, also explain the link between what has been done under the SWAF's 19 and 20 call and the new acceleration service, because probably there is some clarity to be casted by you in your reply. Over to you, Stijn. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. So under Horizon 2020, in the last year, 2020, we provide complementary support to the European University Alliances that are piloted through Erasmus. We provide support for 39 alliances to pursue transformations in the very same areas that I highlighted here as example. Now, the acceleration services target all higher education institutions or as much as possible, a high number of higher education institutions. The European universities have about 280 members, being 5% of the higher education institution community in Europe. So that's a difference. The European strategy for universities will empower all institutions, all higher education institutions in Europe, and the European University Initiative, the alliances. Now, as regards to the question, when would the next call be published? So currently, the further rollout of the European University Initiative is being co-created with member states, with stakeholder organizations, and with the 41 pilot alliances. A first call for bridging funding of of the current alliances is foreseen under the Erasmus program 2022. But as I said, it is preliminary information. It is being developed as we speak. There will be no support call for the European University Alliances under this Horizon Europe work program. The current projects just started or are about to start. So we will, before launching new support through Horizon Europe for the European University Initiative, we will first analyze the impact achieved by the initiative and by the individual projects. Nevertheless, the alliances, when they see problems and they seek support, could make use of this acceleration service. They could be within the user groups of the project. But I repeat, the acceleration services are targeting all higher education institutions, those who are willing to induce institutional change. This afternoon, in the other session on widening, I will explain a bit more on the transformation areas, as well as on the specific support we will be providing for the European Universities Initiative. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Stijn. As we are on the acceleration services topic, there are two additional questions. One on the expected impact, facilitating access to finance from various forms of sources. Could you explain what is expected from proposal in this regard? And there is also a question on, you mentioned an upcoming Commission communication, when it will be published. So if you can again give some explanation regarding these two questions related to the acceleration service topic.
Yes, thank you, Fabrice. So the European Strategy for Universities, which is a preliminary name, it has been called Higher Education Transformation Agenda as well. We are not sure about the name. The thing is, it will be empowering higher education institutions in all their missions, all their dimensions. And the adoption of this, which is supposed to be communication, is foreseen for January 2022. So in time for this call. On the funding, I'm not sure I understood the question, but let me try. So the project is expected to help institutions, if they are not able to do it themselves, to get access to funds that will help them or that are necessary to make the institutional transformations. These funds could be from national, regional, or European source of any kind. We expect to have support mechanisms that will facilitate this job for institutions. For instance, if you have capacity or you want to develop in a network capacity in one of the partners of a network, infrastructure on open science, on an open data repository, how can this be done? Where could the money come from? Which kind of support mechanism should be set up to ensure the sharing of this data repository by all the partners? So that's what we expect.
Thank you, Stijn, for this reply, I think, which is very related to the question. Now, there is also one question linked to the network and training for research managers, the topic 20 for 21, for the participation of Armenia, Ukraine, and Georgia. For this in this topic. So could you give us some reply to this question, please?
Well, associated countries to Horizon Europe are eligible participants. And the dissemination of practices, the dissemination of training mechanisms, certification methods of research managers is one of the expected outcomes of this topic on the research management. Yes. If I may, Fabrice, I also saw a question passing on ERA hubs, but it went down.
Yeah, please, if you would like to reply as well on this, it was the next one on my shopping list.
So there was a question indeed referred in the slide on preparatory work of an ongoing analysis. This is really ongoing right now as we speak. And results and preliminary results will be shared with the scientific community through publications. There is no outcome yet published, so you will find it later. But this is important to note. Keep an eye on the European Publication Office for this.
Okay, thank you very much for this this reply. There is also one question, I will take it, about the ERANETs, ERANET calls, which are not to be called ERANET anymore now, but let's say that's a continuation of the ERANET. It's topic 09 in 21 and 22, if I remember well, the digits. Well, there will be a presentation in the afternoon by our colleague Marnix, surgeon. Marnix is deputy head of unit in unit G4 of RTD, and he will explain you. And maybe if you can keep this question for this afternoon to check out with Marnix if there will be guidelines for the preparation of this ERANET call. Maybe one last question, Stein, for you. What does DEAP stands for in, I think, in the acceleration services topic? If you could give what's behind this strange animals, a strange acronym, please.
Yes. I'm sorry for using all the Euro ER jargon. DEAP stands for Digital Education Action Plan. So it is published last year in September as a package together with the Commission communication on the European education area and the new European research area. And the Digital Education Action Plan provides actions from European level and in collaboration with member states on improving infrastructure, digital infrastructure of across all education entities, not only higher education, and improvement of digital skills of people, students, as well as early career researchers. So I hope that is clear. So the European strategy for universities builds on this. It builds also on the other parts of the package, the ERA and the European education area, and the European skills agenda, which is renewed last year as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stein, for this clarification, and apologies to all the attending people for the jargon that we are using overly in the Commission, but it's easing our work sometimes. So that's part of the work of the Commission. Maybe first I would like to thank my colleagues from Unit A3. Dealing with universities and researchers for this very good, very precise, very comprehensive presentation, and in particular to Stein Dolore, who made this presentation and who was so kind to reply to the various questions. I think we went through all the questions so far. Maybe there will be some additional, and if it is the case, we will reply in writing to you. So now, thank you again, colleagues. And now we can switch to the next session for this era part of the WIDERA work program presentation. So for this new session, we will have my colleague Dorian Karatzas. Dorian is working in the unit RTD03, which is currently dealing with the ethics issue. So you have to also bear in mind that ethics is one big part of the ERA work program, which is enshrined and highlighted in the specific program decision of the Council for the implementation of Horizon Europe. The colleagues in the ethics sector, from SWAFs to ERA, have explored the different aspects of the ethics field. So you have, let's say, ethics as a cross-cutting issue in the Horizon Europe, but you also have some research linked to ethics that my colleagues Dorian, Yves, Yamina, and others are dealing daily with. And Dorian will make now the presentation on the ethics topics within the work program 21-22, and with a focus on the 21 actions. And then, if you allow, we will have a question time related to the presentation of Dorian. So Dorian, the floor is yours, and thank you again for being with us and bringing the light, your lights, on these actions in the work program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabrice. Just as a point of clarification, because as people from outside do not understand necessarily our acronyms, they also do not know our numbers. So the unit 03 is the unit that, apart from the fact that my personal inspiration is that at some point it gets 007, so it's 007, but that's another question. The topic is, the title of the unit is Science, Policy, Advice and Ethics. And the ethics part is, I'm the head of the sector for the ethics part. And I will present now the two topics of 21 and very briefly the topic of 22 if we have time. If I can have the next slide, please. And the next. So the first topic, 0190, it's the challenges of research ethics and integrity in response to crisis, the coronavirus pandemic and beyond. Next slide, please. Here we have the special conditions. I will be a little bit forewarning you that for a lot of the questions that come for the international cooperation part, we are preparing already a frequently asked question. A lot of discussion happened already in the introductory session this morning. So there will be an explanatory frequently asked question that will appear in the call topic. Nevertheless, it is important to mention that for this topic, international collaboration is extremely important. Pandemics or crises do not recognize borders, and they go all over the place, as our current experience shows. So that's why we have a very strong component of international cooperation. The chosen countries also indicate an orientation, because those are countries that have used different approaches in working with the pandemic. And of course, in Africa countries, first of all, because it's a policy orientation, and second of all, because in the ethics part, it is very important, as we all discuss and we all hear and we all see in the news, that it's important that the benefits of research are shared globally, because if they are not shared, you cannot address a situation like a pandemic. You cannot address it correctly. The second part of this first slide relates to our effort to increase the impact of the work that we will be financing. You will remember, you probably have seen that this is a trend that follows from the previous calls. So basically what we want to do is connect the work that goes under research ethics and research integrity to policy orientations, policy decisions that the Commission and the member states have taken, and also involve as much as possible policy actors at the member state level. So here you will see, for example, that we already ask for strong collaboration with the European network of research ethics committees and research integrity offices. Those are national offices, those are national structures that bring into the national practices. And of course, ENDRIO, the European Network of Research Integrity Offices, because they have a practical approach to the issue of research integrity, which is extremely important. You also see in this first slide that we make a very strong reference to the use of the EAT platform, Embassy of Good Science. As we have discussed in previous years, our effort is that the output of all our projects, it's easily findable. After 3 years or 4 years when the project ends, we have to be able to trace, to find, to use the output of our projects. So we have created this e-platform, which is called the Embassy of Good Science. It is active already, where everybody, member state representatives, research managers, researchers, citizens can go in and see what is available, particularly from European research projects in ethics and research integrity, from national activities, and from other projects internationally in this particular area. It's what we call a one-stop shop. So those are 3 partners that we want to see in our projects. The next slide, please. In particular, for the challenges concerning the pandemics, I don't think I need to explain it or to discuss it with you in detail. We live it. We see it in the news. We see it in the newspapers. You do not have to be a scientist to see how important it is for a society to be prepared for a situation like we have been facing for the last year, how difficult it is to make proposals and actions if you are not prepared, for example, on vaccination policy, on obligatory measures, on everything that we have done during the pandemic that caused a quite considerable shift in the way we live our lives and the way we understand the relationship between the citizen, the research community, and the policymakers. So we want to do this effort in order to increase our preparedness for the next time that we are going to have such a challenge, and we are going to have a next time, hopefully not too soon. Also, in relation to the experience that we have gained as a society. And this is extremely important because that's how the measures that we take and the preparedness that we put in place have a practical application. They mean something. They can be easily understood. And obviously, ethics is practically everywhere in this discussion, from the basic process of clinical trials for approving a vaccine to publication of articles concerning research on COVID, where we have seen a very speedy process of publication, of research and publication, which is absolutely necessary because we need data as fast as possible, and the policymakers need data as fast as possible in order to design the policies that affect all our lives. But while being speedy, we also should not at all costs forget the principles that dictate that the outcome is proper, that we can trust the scientific outcome, that the data is good, and this data we can use reliably to form policy. Next slide, please. in doing this work, we also want to relate to activities that have been taking place in the European Union, of course. We have advice, and globally. We have advice on how to prepare the society. We have a lot of discussion of how to be doing better now, but also to learn the lessons that are necessary in order to improve our system for the next time. And we want the future beneficiaries not only to discuss the ethics as a separate part of a philosophical discussion about what it is to deal with pandemics, but also to take into account the practical aspect. We cannot wait the next pandemic to implement the lessons learned. We have to implement them today and tomorrow and the day after. So there is a sense of immediacy that you will see it's translated in practical steps like a how-to guidance. How do I improve the way my laboratory works? How do I make sure that the data that I produce is fastly produced and well produced? So questions like this and many others, of course, are in the scope of this project. Next question, please. Sorry, next slide, please. The next topic has to do with what we call ensuring reliability and trust in quality of research ethics expertise in the context of new emerging technologies. We all know, and we have discussed it with our communities many times, that emerging technologies present a number of challenges for our society. We can take artificial intelligence, gene editing, all these new technologies and many more to come, superconducting, for example, or many technologies. We have to allow our applicants also to choose what are the technologies that they want to focus in order to draw the best lessons. Next slide, please. It is important also, this is exactly the same, almost the same slide. We are asking for the same participation, and we are asking also the same connection with existing European bodies in order to enhance the output. Next slide, please. It is true that one of the challenges that we have, it's not only the theoretical level. You have seen that, for example, in artificial intelligence and genetic editing, the question of ethics always comes in, always. You cannot have a discussion on emerging technologies. The two examples are easy, but any emerging technology, without actually addressing the issue of the ethical implications and the ethical impact in research and in our society and on us as individuals. In order to do that properly, you need expertise. You need to build the expertise. We are in a situation in our trajectory where the traditional ethics expertise that we used until now are not sufficient not only at the level of knowledge, but also at the level of numbers. We just don't have enough. We just don't have enough trained people in order for them to help steer, educate, promote, assist the researchers, the bench researchers, to embed ethics from day one of the design of their programs. So we want to do this in order to increase the availability, not only for Horizon Europe, obviously, but for all national activities that need this kind of input. Next slide, please. In order to do that, and we know, for example, from all our experience in education, in any type of education, that we fund, we have an output, we have educational programs, educational toolkits, modules. Sometimes we do not have the resources, the money, and the time to follow up and see what is the impact of those resources. We try to do that in ethics because it's absolutely necessary. It's obvious if the educational system does not work because it does not produce qualified expertise and knowledgeable researchers, but also research managers, policymakers, etc. It's not only in the research community that we want to limit the impact of our educational activities. In this particular call, we have done a very interesting switch in the measurement of the impact of the educational tools. We are proposing to use approximately 300 or more ethics experts that we are using in the ethics evaluation of Horizon Europe applications. Those are the people, which is practically the largest publicly funded ethics review process in Europe, if not globally, just because of the sheer numbers of proposals that we get. We want to use them as research participants. So we want to train them and see immediately the impact of this training on the performance of their tasks while they're evaluating Horizon Europe applications. So there we will be able in real time to improve, to change, and to better the output of our activities. We have discussed it, I think, many times with many partners. There is a real need for this type of expertise. It might sound trivial to some, but actually it is not. We are facing this major challenge with artificial intelligence now, because all countries and the European Union are investing considerable amounts of funds in research in this area. A big part of the impact is based on the analysis of the ethics of artificial intelligence, not only when a product goes into the market and becomes part of our lives, but also, obviously, at the conception, design, and implementation phase. And there, the old style of ethics review, where you had an ethics review panel looking at the proposal at the middle of its life, and basically that was it, does not apply. You need to have a new process, a new expertise that follows a project from conception all the way to product, and in the case of artificial intelligence, during the life of the product, when it becomes accessible by everybody. So it is important to have also this line of impact, which is considerable in emerging technologies. We can use also quantum computing, which will change a lot of things in the way we think and we do things, and that will come up. In this project, we are trying to get the connection between the expertise that will be trained and will be formed through the activities of this call with all the previous projects that we are, or current projects that we are funding, that are looking at emerging technologies for the future of research. So we want to do this connection in order to be able to allow the output of previous projects to be used real time. And this is really important in order to make full use of the limited funding that we have for research ethics and integrity. Last but not least, I will spend a little bit of time on the call of 22. Next slide, please. This is the call that the topic is the empirical and behavioral approach to research ethics and integrity. Next slide, please. You see here that we do not request specific countries to participate. It's up to the beneficiaries to decide what they need. The reason being that behavioral issues and empirical research and behavioral research could be localized. And by localized, I'm talking about Europe. It is true that we have a slightly different approach to ethics issues, human rights, and legislation in Europe, as opposed to the United States, for example, and China from the other hand. So we want to see primarily, this is a much more European-looking project, if you like. So we want to see the factors that affect the lives of our own scientists here. Next slide, please. If I could summarize it fast, I would say that the topic of this call or the subheading of this call could be why good people do bad things. This is the crutch. We know that research integrity sometimes gets confused or forgotten when we talk about research misconduct, when things go bad, when there is a situation, a scandal in research science terms that affects the way science and research is seen by the public. It affects greatly the trust to research. We see aspects of it sometimes, or most of the times, without good justification. Now, during the pandemic, we see the flow of fake news affecting the decision of people. And also, we see the pressures to publish or perish, to build a successful career that might lead good people, and that's what we care mostly, do things that are not proper. So we want to examine what are those conditions and how do they affect the behavior of researchers in given environments. Obviously, career prospects is one. I mean, there are obvious ones. Pressure from the laboratory head or the head of the university is another. Business opportunities is a third. But those are the support. This is the umbrella. We want to see the individual factors, the behavioral factors, the psychological factors that affect this behavior in order to take measures to support researchers when they most need it. Daily in their lab, daily in their contacts with their hierarchies, daily when they have to report a misconduct of someone superior, someone that has a lot of power in the future of especially young researchers or even young students. How do they proceed? Do they close their eyes and they go about their business ignoring certain facts, or do they have the opportunity to address the issue, and how? How are they getting protected? Voila. So that's what we want to do with this third call. Fabrice, I will close up here, and I'm open to discussion or questions, if there are any from the audience.
There are some questions. It's a very, very interesting presentation on the ethics and the challenges of ethics ahead, in particular in this pandemic situation. Now, I think yes. Sorry. Okay. So well, we can let the time for the questions now, and I hand over the floor to you and Yamina. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take them as they come. I think I can see them. So I will read the first one. Emerging technologies topic, why focus on ethics experts only and not on trainings for researchers who work with emerging technologies? Very good question. Actually, it is a double approach. Most of the ethics experts that participate in the process are also educators and trainers themselves. And we have done that via previous projects in our funding mechanism, in order to be able to see how first you have to train the trainers, and then you use those trainers to train the younger generation. If you see in the call, we ask for real-time training. So we train the experts, and then we ask the experts to train younger researchers, early career researchers. It's not ageism, it's early career researchers, in order to improve the overall coherence and availability in the system. Somehow yes, here it is. Sorry. all ethics topics ask for the inclusion of entities from China, Korea, Africa. Why is this background? And is one entity from each third country sufficient? As I said, we prepare a frequently asked question, but very briefly. With China, we have the EU-China Innovation Dialogue that has as a priority, among the 10 priorities, ethics and research integrity. So it is extremely important to collaborate, of course, with people outside the Union on areas that are global. Korea, South Korea would be also a candidate, has also identified ethics and research integrity as part of the issues that they want to communicate, discuss, collaborate with the European Union. Apart from that, China and Korea are two countries that in the pandemic have played a very important role, and they have slightly different social approaches to the way that they handle the pandemic. And this is part of the lessons learned. Africa is also part of the international collaboration policies of the European Union, and also represents an area that extra effort has to be taken in areas like fairness, equal distribution, and benefit sharing. So that's why we have this identification. Does not exclude any other country, right? We don't say this or nothing, does not exclude any other country. Next, the question, ENERI, ENRIO, Embassy of Science, Eligibility are structured collaborate, but others says we want them to be partners. I see this is a difference. Yes, it's true. We cannot impose exactly, especially because ENERI and ENRIO are networks. They have to discuss with the beneficiaries what exactly their role will be in the consortium. What we want to avoid at all cost is that they are a cherry in a pie. We want them to be involved. Structural collaboration means that they have to be a well-defined role in the consortium, not being a member of the consortium of the scientific panel. That's not enough. We want them to have an active role. The Embassy of Good Science, as we discussed, is a depository. It's a place where all the projects will be instructed now and in the future to deposit their outputs. It does not mean that they cannot deposit it in their own websites. They can do whatever they like with their websites, obviously. But in order for the European Union, the research community, the member states, the research managers to have access always to this output, we want to put them into a sustainable platform that hopefully will become what we call one-stop shop. Thank you. Are there any specific calls under the SNIL where UK institution partners will not be able to participate? I think this was discussed in the first session. I'm not going to repeat it because everybody's waiting for also new guidance on this issue. What are the main requirements, qualifications to participate in the ethics expert training? If you're talking about the training that will be carried out in the context of the second call, you have to be registered in the Horizon Europe Ethics Expert Database. And there we will select which ones would like to participate voluntary in this process. A consortium will also choose ethics experts from the national systems. We just offer Horizon Europe as a good, excellent, I would say, test bed for all the activities of the consortium. In Horizon today, it was specifically instructed not to include names of ERA shareholders. Really, Fabrice, do you Is this, I really don't understand this question. I apologize. I don't know if any of my colleagues.
Thanks, Dorian. I'm taking back, so maybe I can, because I have a problem. Yes, in H 2020, it was specifically instructed not to include names for ERA shareholders. Now the proposal should be made around the CV and of the holders. Please comment. So honestly, we will have to check this. So we keep the question in the, let's say, in the fridge, and we will reply to the person in writing, because honestly, I have no information coming to my mind on this, and I would avoid commenting wrongly on this. Well, there is also another question. Maybe I over to you, Dorian, about the China-Korea. I would just like to repeat what you said before, that there will be a kind of fact about this aspect. But maybe, Dorian, you would like to comment on this new question related to this, let's say, international cooperation aspect with China and with Korea. Please, yes. Dorian.
We see from the, thank you, Fabrice. We see from the guide that non-associated countries, third countries, can participate as beneficiaries if they fulfilled a certain number list of criteria. Obviously, this is up to the consortium to decide, in discussion with their partners outside the EU, how this participation should take place. It has to be, if they are beneficiaries, it has to be justified. We have 5 conditions that are quite strict, and that the evaluators look very carefully in order to justify receiving EU funding. If you think that we have a limited budget, we would like, but this is it's not something that the beneficiaries have to follow, that if these countries could fund their own activities because it will also be for their benefit, it's fine with us. If they want to be beneficiaries, they have to fill in the exact criteria as described in the guide. Thanks.
Thank you, Dorian. I take back the floor. I think it's very clear, and all this will be expressed in the fact with the additional information on this aspect. Okay, is there any additional question? I'm trying to check out if something is appearing in the Slido, but I do not. If I correct me if I am wrong, but I do not see any additional question. So maybe I would like to thank you, Dorian, for first your very passionate presentation, enthusiastic, and very well documented with all the precision, the detail, let's say the big picture in the meantime. And also I would like to thank all your team.
Thank you, Fabrice.
Which has, if everybody agrees, sorry, we could go to the next session, which is dedicated to the gender of the program. Well, let's say the gender session now. As you probably all know, the gender has always been part of the previous programs, Science in Society, Science with and for Society, SWAFs, and now we have a kind of continuation of the gender in Horizon Europe. First, on the general aspects proposal and as a cross-cutting issue, but also as a field of research
Should I take the floor?
Because it's probably one of the, we have the opportunity to have Anne Pépin. She's now on the screen. So Anne is D4, democracy and values of the DG RTD, and she's working related to gender, which is dealing with the gender aspect of the research. She will present for ERA and WIDERA, and then she will reply to, I'm sure, all the questions you have in mind. Now over to you, Anne, if you want to start with the presentation. And thank you very much for being there and helping us. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabrice. I had trouble hearing what you were saying, but I'll just clarify that I will be presenting both the two topics. Sorry, I don't see the presentation. I guess I should pin this. So I'll be presenting, thank you, both the two topics that are specifically addressing gender equality in the 2021 work program, and also gender equality as a cross-cutting priority in Horizon Europe. And there are several requirements that are involved, and I'll quickly run you through this after presenting the two topics. So next slide, please. The two topics that are opened are actually stemming directly from the Commission's communication on the new European research area, which underlined that there were persisting gender inequalities in the European research and innovation system. There was also a lack of integration of the gender dimension into the contents of research and innovation. And there was a need to open gender equality policies to more inclusiveness. And this was proposed as an umbrella action that will develop with the member states, the Commission developing with the member states and stakeholders, inclusive gender equality plans in member states and to advance gender equality. So under this umbrella action to implement it, under 2021, there are two topics. The first one is a Center of Excellence on Inclusive Gender Equality in Research and Innovation. And the second one is policy coordination to advance the implementation of the ERA gender equality and inclusiveness objectives within member states. Next slide, please. So I'll start with the first one. Next slide. Thank you. So the ERA 0180, which is the Center of Excellence, which is a research and innovation action with an estimated budget, indicative budget of 5 million euros for a priori one project. Next slide, please. So the expected outcome is actually twofold: to advance the knowledge, the policy and the practice on inclusive gender equality in research and innovation institutions across Europe, with an intersectional, but also an geographically inclusive and a multi-sectorial approach. I will be describing a little bit more precisely what that entails, and also to reduce disparities across member states and to strengthen the ERA and its gender equality and inclusive objectives. Next slide, please. So a bit of the scope and the context. Now, having a gender equality plan in place is becoming an eligibility criterion for certain categories of legal entities applying to Horizon Europe. I'll be detailing that in my next presentation. And I already recalled that there's a strong focus that is foreseen to promote inclusive gender equality plans in the new era. So there is a strong need for expert policy and knowledge support for inclusive gender equality plan implementation in the era in research and innovation organization. And this includes performing organization, funding organization, and also private organization companies and SMEs. So that also means that we need to adapt these policies to the different national and local situation, so that there is really an effective transformation across countries and in institutions, including those that are less advanced on this topic of gender equality. So next slide, please. So it's what we want to create is actually the first European Center of Excellence on inclusive gender equality in research and innovation. And of course, this builds on knowledge and expertise that has been developed in previous projects and actions that have been funded in particular under the Science with and for Society Work Program in Horizon 2020. And this includes projects such as ACT, which was developing and is developing communities of practice on the implementation of gender equality plans and measures across Europe in research organization. Also GE Academy, which is developing capacity building trainings on this, and Project Gender Action, which is a policy network of representatives from national authorities, but also from national centers on gender and science, to advance the policy agenda on gender equality in the era. And it should also take into account activities that are actually now just launched by a pilot European facility on knowledge and support on the institutional change through gender equality plans, which will develop guidance that will be coming out very soon on how to comply with the Horizon Europe Gender Equality Plan eligibility criterion, and which also will also develop trainings and mutual learning activities. So of course, proposals should take that into account to the extent that these activities are already developed. And also, it should build on initiatives that are developed in centers of excellence already existing at national or regional level, knowledge centers on gender equality in research and innovation in Europe, and also actions from umbrella organizations. So next slide, please. What should be covered in this proposal? There are three core activities. Establish a sustainable European Center of Excellence, a think tank. It's very much a think tank to advance and disseminate the knowledge on inclusive gender equality policies in research and innovation. And there are three levels that should be addressed. One is very much looking at intersections with other social categories and ground for discriminations, and addressing certain vulnerable or marginalized categories. And this, for example, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, LGBTIQ related areas, or else social origin. So that's part of the intersectional approach. Then we want to look at the sectorial level, so really to better address and better engage with the innovation sector and the private sector, and geographical inclusiveness, making sure everybody is on board and taken into account in this inclusive gender equality plan approach. So this center, it could be one center of excellence, but it can also be a network of different hubs with a core center and different hubs in different member states. And what is for sure is that it should involve experts from different member states, including the widening countries. Then the second strand of activities that should develop, it's to provide expertise and support. So policy advice to member states, to research and innovation organization, and also to the Commission in designing, implementing, and also assessing institutional change through inclusive gender equality plans. So developing the concept, a think tank, and also providing advice and support on this, in particular through tailored trainings, activities on inclusive gender equality in R&I, and developing an enhanced community of practice on inclusive gender equality, on gender equality and diversity in research and innovation organization. And the third strand is to support actually statistical data collection at the pan-European level on gender equality, inclusive gender equality in R&I, in particular addressing intersectional aspects, and give also information on the uptake of gender equality plan across member states. And this is meant to feed also our landmark publication on the state of play of gender equality in research and innovation, which is the She Figures. So that's it for this topic, and I'll switch, next slide please, to the second topic, which is the policy coordination to advance the implementation of ERA gender equality and inclusiveness objectives within member states. This one is a coordination and support action, and the estimated budget, indicative budget, is 3 million euros, and again, a priori for one project. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there's an overall expected outcome, which is to develop a consistent and sustainable coordination network of national level representatives on gender equality and inclusiveness to support the implementation, again, of the ERA communication on the new of 30th September 2020. And next slide, please. So this really reflects the need for better coordination at national level. The scope, again, we recall that the context and the objectives are the one of this new ERA communication, but also of the Council conclusions of the December 1st last year on the new ERA, in which member states underline the need for policy coordination and to advance the implementation of the ERA objectives. And once again, this should be opening up gender equality policies to the three inclusiveness levels that I already mentioned. And this is very much in line with the approach taken by the Commission in the overall gender equality strategy for 2020-2025. Next slide, please. This should very much build, in particular, well, on previous project, but in particular on gender action, which is primarily a network of national level representatives on gender equality in the ERA. And actually, this project is holding right now its final conference in parallel with this session today, but this session will be recorded, so you can consult and see the outcomes of these projects and how much policy advice and what kind of policy advice they have been delivering. So what should this network be doing? Okay, first, don't move the slide yet. So it's really, we want a sustainable network, national level representative all EU member states and associated countries to be addressed in that network. We want both representatives from national bodies such as ministries and from national level research funding or agencies, and really to support the implementation of inclusive gender equality in the ERA. And now, specifically what should be delivered. Next slide, please. There are more activities. So first, an important aspect is really to engage with citizens, have innovative activities to connect citizens, experts and policymakers, and help advance policymaking both at national and European administration level. Then the idea is to provide support and to advance and develop the knowledge and also build capacities, competences on gender equality and mainstreaming of gender in research and innovation to a variety of European and national stakeholders. And in particular, this should be carried out through mutual learning exercises, really to build up the competence of the national gender equality representatives, with the intention to really help less experienced countries, and this includes some countries from the widening countries. You should establish a community of practice of funding organizations for the promotion of gender inclusive culture change in research organization across Europe, including through a memorandum of understanding, some kind of real commitment. And there should be specific attention in this community of practice of funders on how to promote the uptake of gender equality plans, either through incentives or requirements, a bit like the Commission is doing with the requirement for the gender equality plan eligibility criterion, and a specific focus on gender-based violence, including sexual harassment, trying to establish a zero tolerance policy on gender-based violence. This network should have a focus in particular on the integration of the gender dimension into the content of research and innovation, with an opening to intersectionality. And for this, the policy report that the Commission released last November on gendered innovations, it can be of a particular help. And this should, of course, involve experts on sex and gender-based analysis from across Europe, including to help contact points in Horizon Europe, since the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content, and I will detail that, is now a requirement by default across the whole Horizon Europe program. And importantly as well, this should be done in conjunction, the work of this network, with the official ERA-related groups, so related to the governance of the European research area, the new research European area, and also in collaboration with the Commission. Next slide, please. And that's important. We are encouraging that among beneficiaries, there be at least 23 member states and also national representatives from associated countries. This is strongly encouraged, but the activities themselves should really be deployed and considering addressing all member states and, as much as possible, all associated countries. And this is it for the topics, the two topics. And I can switch now, please, next slide. Yes, next slide. To the cross-cutting aspect of gender equality, what you need to take into account to have a successful proposal in this work program part, but any work program part in Horizon Europe. So there are 3 levels There's a strengthened legal base regarding gender equality in Horizon Europe. It's an eligibility criterion to have a gender equality plan. Integrating the gender dimension is an award criterion for RIAs and IAs, and gender balance is really important. There's a target for gender balance in all boards related to Horizon Europe, to evaluation committees, and it's also a ranking criterion for the execo proposal. So I'll detail each of these as quickly as I can. I see time is passing by. Next slide, please. Gender equality plans. Next slide. Thank you. So as of the 2022 calls, well, deadlines in 2022. So it's not yet valid for calls with deadlines in 2021. So not for these the strengthening the ERA or widening calls. Public bodies, research organization, and higher education establishment, and for these two last categories, be they private or public, will need to have in place a gender equality plan that will fulfill a minimum set of requirements, and I'll detail those in the next slide. This is a self-declaration. Eventually, this will be part of the legal entity validation process. So organization will only fill this questionnaire once, unless their status changes. So the questionnaire, you can already see it in the application forms, and this is for information purposes and also for monitoring purposes for us already in 2021. Next slide, please. What you need to have in this, to fulfill this gender equality plan eligibility criterion are 4 process-related requirements. It needs to be a public document endorsed by the top leadership of your institution, and committing the organization, of course, to gender equality through plan, through measures, and with targets. And this should be published on your website. You need to have dedicated resources, be those financial or human, such as gender equality officer positions. You need to build your plan on evidence. So you need to collect and monitor data, which is sex disaggregated or gender disaggregated. If you're looking more at gender equality than biological sex at birth, and you need to annually report on this and monitor the progress of the implementation of your plan. And finally, you need to raise awareness, build capacity on gender equality in research and innovation, and address in particular unconscious gender biases, and deliver those trainings in particular to decision makers and also staff. That's the mandatory requirements. Next step, next slide. Thank you. We also recommend some thematic areas to be covered, and all these building blocks, we call them, they're really the result of a consensus with national expert gender equality plan implementing project we have been funding under SWAFs and national representatives. So those 5 important areas are work-life balance and organizational culture, gender balance in decision-making, gender balance throughout the career progression and in recruitment, the integration of the gender dimension into the content of research that organization carry out or fund, or in the teaching that is delivered, and finally measures to address gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. Next slide, please. So this is just to summarize key things you should keep in mind. It's a self-declaration. You don't upload your gender equality plan when you apply to Horizon Europe. There's a tolerance for until actually grant agreement preparation stage. So if you don't have a gender equality plan in your institution yet, when you submit a proposal within a consortium, it's okay. This will not impact the evaluation, but you will need to have a gender equality plan if you want to be part of the grant agreement and to be funded under Horizon Europe. If you don't have it at that stage and your proposal is selected, you will not, you cannot participate. If you have an equivalent document, if it's not called gender equality plan, but it's called the inclusion and diversity strategy or some other kind of strategy, or even different documents, if they cover the 4 process-related mandatory requirements, then it's considered as an equivalent. Then when you sign the grant agreement, you are committing to, in a way, being coherent with the plan that you have at institutional level. And there will be random compliance checks in the duration of the program. Next slide, please. There's already a lot of documentation to help you build up, implement your gender equality plan. The GEAR tool that we developed with the European Institute for Gender Equality has many good practices many examples of plans, but we are also developing additional guidance really fitting those eligibility criterion, the requirements, the building blocks, and this will be published over the summer, hopefully. So next slide, please. The integration of the gender dimension, next slide. So now this, which is under a sub-criterion with respect to the methodology in the excellence criterion of research and innovation actions, is becoming a requirement. Next slide. So this really, when we say gender dimension, that's an umbrella term that covers sex analysis and or gender analysis that you should have in mind, even when your priority areas you want to address, the research questions, how you collect data, who your project will benefit to, you should keep that in mind. And in the work program, unless you see a sentence that looks like this one, saying in this topic, it is not a mandatory requirement, you have to do it. And it is the case across the widening participation and strengthening the ERA work program. So this is important because looking at potential differences, sex-related, gender-related, this will increase the rigor, this will increase the reproducibility, the creativity of your proposal. This will also increase its societal relevance and better address the variety and diversity of the population. Next slide. And I already mentioned this policy report. You have the links there, and these experts really try to refine the methodology for sex analysis, for gender analysis, and intersectional analysis, looking at all kinds of scientific disciplines and really very much related to the clusters and what is addressed in Horizon Europe. And you will find all kinds of useful resources there and also in the program guide. Next slide, please. And finally, gender balance. Next slide. So there are different criteria to rank proposals that are ex aequo. The first one is really in the topic description, comparing those projects with the same scores, but that cover more of what's in the topic description. That's the first ranking criterion. Then comes the scores on excellence, then the score on innovation. It's reversed for innovation action. And then we look at the gender balance among the researcher population that is named in the proposal and that is primarily responsible for carrying out the research and innovation activities. And geographical diversity comes after that. Next slide, please. One new thing is that we are opening a third gender identity category for researchers to declare their gender. So now it's women, men, and non-binary. And I will stop here. I think it's yes, after I'm just providing useful resources. You can go to the next slide and the next one. Just that on our policy webpage, and you have the link here, we have created a specific section on gender equality requirements in Horizon Europe. They're indicated there. We have a FAQ on the gender equality plan eligibility criterion. And next slide, please. There already was a webinar specifically on horizontal aspects, and one is on gender, and you have the links here. And we have a functional mailbox if you have questions on those cross-cutting aspects. And I'll give the floor to myself to answer some questions, I guess, if there are some in Slido. Let's see. Sorry. Thank you. Gender equality plans. How do we know that the strategy that we have is sufficient? Well, like I said, for the Commission, if you comply with the 4 process-related requirements, this is what we will be looking for as a compliance check. So, public document, resources, collecting sex and or gender desegregated data and monitoring it and reporting on it, and delivering trainings. These are the things that we will be checking in the compliance checks. Of course, we want you to go beyond, and the whole idea of the inclusive era is also to go beyond and open policies to more inclusiveness. Center of Excellence why is this area? It does include research aspects. It's really a think tank to advance on the knowledge of what inclusive gender equality entails. It's really carrying out research on this and better understanding what it entails. That's why. But it's true that it's some aspects of it are also close to a CSA. So a policy coordination call, is it basically meant to be a continuation? Of course, it's not a continuation. It has to build on what Gender Action has produced, the knowledge that's been developed, the kind of support that's been developed, but it's a new network, and there is room for newcomers, especially research funders at the national level. That's a key novelty. A topic for a Center of Excellence in the other action part of the this is, so you are talking about an other action, which is a grant to identified beneficiary at this stage, which is for 2022 work program. So this is different, and this is more of a continuation of the current pilot knowledge and support facility that we have launched last March. Really being close to the eligibility criterion on gender equality plan in Horizon Europe. So from what I understand, there will not be any funding for the actual gender equality plans of organization. Well, if it's an eligibility criterion, you have to do it beforehand. Indeed, that's the idea, is that you need to implement by yourself, because this is, we have been funding this for a long time. To over 200 organizations have been funded since FP7 to implement gender equality plans, and the member states themselves are calling for gender equality plan to be enforced as an instrument at national level to achieve gender equality. This is in the council conclusion. So indeed, with those basic requirements, we are requiring that institutions do it by themselves. Of course, they can look for synergies with other programs such as the structural funds that can help and implement gender equality plans. But in 2022, we will fund the implementation of measures that really supporting inclusive gender equality plan. JETs are an equality mechanisms with, again, at the level of the compliance, we are looking only at the 4 mandatory requirements. But of course, and that's also one of the tasks of the Center of Excellence, is to reflect on how to best assess and monitor the implementation of gender equality plans and inclusive gender equality plans. So I don't think I should address the 2022 topics at this stage. So I'll skip to the next question. Could regional policymakers participate in which? I mean, of course. Or is it focused on member states? Yes, of course, they can be involved. But the focus is indeed on national level. But in the Center of Excellence, it's very much open to, there are existing regional centers. There are in the Nordic countries, for example, centers of excellence at a regional level. So did I understand it correctly? The new Gender Action Project, I don't know what is the new Gender Action Project. And train NCPs, no. I don't think this is, it should liaise, but with NCPs indeed, that's for sure. The new eligibility requirements for gender equality plans, what will this mean in the day-to-day work for, I mean, what do you mean? It will change if you, that's the whole idea, to create sustainable institutional change in our organization that will benefit everybody working in those organizations, because there will be more gender equality in everyday practices, policies, and relation between staff. Yes. So I guess I answered all the questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. I think you have answered to all the questions that I've seen in the Slido. So I would like to thank you very much for your intervention, to the replies to all the questions, and to your very clear presentation for this issues of the utmost importance, that is gender in research and in general, but in research as well. Well, maybe there would be additional question we can reply later on by writing. So thank you very much again, to you and to your team. Well, maybe now we can pass to the last part of this first session related to ERA. So I would like to convey you the following message. We have the next session at 2:30, same conditions, Slido, etc. We will start with the question on, let's say, the session on open science, and then on citizen science, and with the colleagues from DG RTDA, RTDA4 in charge of open science and citizen science. So I would like to wish you a good lunch, a good appetite, and if you allow, we will wrap up the session now with this session on gender and the gender question, and we will meet up again at 2:30 for the second part of this ERA session. Sorry, it's 2 p.m., not 2:30, so 2 p.m. Absolutely, 2:30 is for Widening, 2 is for us. So we will start again at 2 p.m. with the session on open science and citizen science then. And thank you very much. And I think everybody can take a break now, and see you at 2. Thank you very much.